And if you looked at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign in the debate, I mean, my schedule has been full bore. I've done where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball. I mean, look, he's done virtually nothing. And I don't know how many, don't hold me to it, roughly 20 major events. Some with thousands of people showing up.
Oh, yes. President Biden touting his very busy schedule while taking a swipe at former President Trump last night during that crucial press conference, which was delayed. Biden did make several gaffes during the conference, including calling Kamala Harris Vice President Trump. The president also sending this confusing message on whether he's willing to speak with Russia's Vladimir Putin. Watch.
I'm not ready to talk to Putin unless Putin's ready to change his behavior. I'm prepared to talk to any leader who wants to talk, including if Putin. So my point is, I'm prepared to talk to anybody, but I don't see any inclination. There is an inclination on the part of the Chinese to keep in contact with me because they're not sure where this all goes.
Joining me now is Georgia Congressman Andrew Clyde, a member of the House Intelligence, Armed Services, and Agriculture Committees. Congressman, thanks very much for being here this morning. Your reaction to that press conference last night?
I'm Austin, Maria. I'm much better looking than Andrew.
Sorry about that, sir. Yes, it's good to see you, sir. Thank you. My apologies.
All in good fun. Right.
Yes, of course. What did you expect, and what did you take away from that conference last night?
Well, people are seeing what those of us in the Beltway have been seeing for months now, and that he's got some serious health conditions that have diminished his cognitive capacity. And Maria, candidly, I think the only question now is who are the VP nominees going to be in both parties. If you saw the right after his press conference, Jim Himes, the head of the Intelligence Committee, who's a very serious member of Congress, came out and said, "Thank you for your service, President Biden. We have to move on." Adam Smith has said the same thing. So the two leading House Democrats on national security and our military missions have both called for him to step aside, not because they don't like or respect him, but because they recognize the threat to the country that it is and our national security, and having somebody that has just lost their mental capacity. So I think it's a matter of time. The Democrats probably wait until the Republican convention is over to replace him. They're probably vetting vice president nominees right now. Harris will be their presidential nominee, I believe. And Maria, the thing I would point out that I do think that he's being sabotaged from the people on the inside. And just as someone who's been in office a long time, my question is, why did his team leave him on the stage that long? They know the longer they leave him on the stage, the more mistakes he's going to make. And so I think he's got people both inside the White House and obviously externally that are working to find a VP nominee right now for the Democratic Party, and they'll push Harris up to the top of the ticket.
Such a great point, Congressman Austin Scott. And the fact is that there are reports right now that people in the White House, people around the president, are hoping for some spectacular gaffe to force him out. He's been defiant that he won't go. Do you think there's truth to that? I mean, it's true. You have to question, first of all, why would anyone knowing President Biden and his condition, why would anyone put him on a stage with President Trump in June? That's one thing. I mean, why would they continue to put him out there, big boy press conference, knowing that he is, diminished in some ways? Do they want this out in the open, finally, after covering it for so long?
Sure. So the debate had to happen from their standpoint. But then once the debate happened and he showed even his own supporters that he had this diminished mental capacity, and again, I don't wish him any ill will. I'm just speaking factually. But once he had shown them that he had the diminished capacity, why would they turn around and put him on a stage for a 1-hour press conference after the NATO summit? It would have, if they were operating in his best interest, they would have put him on stage for 10 minutes, maybe 15 at the outside, but to allow him to continue to go on and ramble. The more he talks, the more he proves the point that candidly, a lot of his supporters have already gotten to, and that he has to be replaced.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are a lot of finger pointing going on right now, but when you look at some of these details, Congressman Scott, it's pretty extraordinary. President Biden is even on a script, we're told, during his own cabinet meetings, according to a new CNN report. White House aides are requiring cabinet officials to submit questions and key talking points prior to the meeting with the president. I guess so that the president could prepare an answer before he's actually asked about it. The report also states that the last full cabinet meeting took place on October 2nd, 2023. So almost a year ago. Is it possible, Congressman, that this president has not had a cabinet meeting since October last year?
Well, I think it's probable, and I'll tell you what, it's pretty obvious to me that people inside the White House have been trying to cover up for him and to keep him out of the public view, which again leads me to what I said earlier. You know, you've run basically this cover up to protect the public from knowing about his cognitive challenges, and then all of a sudden now you put him out on stage for an hour in a press conference. Again, the debate had to happen. The NATO summit was already scheduled, so it was going to happen. But to put him on stage for a 1-hour press conference, that tells me, as somebody who's been in politics for a long time, that they are going to continue to push him forward and let him continue to make his mistakes and thereby support, if you will, the Democrats who, again, are respectful about him and say, thank you for your service, but you cognitively don't have what it takes to be in charge of the military of this country and the national security of this country, and you have to go. But,
I mean, how worried should we all be about his hands on the wheel for the next few months? You know, I mean, go ahead, sir.
Who's taking the White House briefings every morning that the three-letter agencies give the President of the United States about what's happening with regard to security both inside and outside of the United States? You look at the diminished decision-making capabilities. I mean, you look at the pier that was in Gaza. That pier was always coming down in August. Nobody that I know outside of President Biden looked at the pluses and minuses of building that pier, knowing that it was going to come down by August because of the waves and the weather conditions in that part of the world, and thought that it was a good idea. This was a bad decision. It shows this issue in and of itself shows the inability to make a decision that would actually work. Yeah. It's Maria, it's a sad situation. He's in very bad health. He is at this stage a risk to the country and our national security, and he's proven that publicly. And so it's time for them to invoke the 25th Amendment. That may be why they're scared to have a cabinet meeting, because if they do have a cabinet meeting, that would actually create the opportunity for them to invoke the 25th Amendment. And then, you know, he's either going to step down or that is going to be invoked, I believe, and Kamala Harris will be the Democratic nominee. And then the question becomes, you know, who are the VP nominees, candidly, for both parties? We'll find out who the Republican nominee is shortly. And I'm sure that the Democratic Party right now is vetting who they want to be the VP nominee, and they will probably wait until the Republican nominee is selected to do that, just because the politics that is smart.
Well, I mean, Congressman, no wonder the country is declining. No wonder the world no longer looks at America the same way, and no wonder no one even noticed when Lloyd Austin had to go to the hospital and was out of commission for a couple of days and didn't even tell anybody, because they're not having cabinet meetings. We should have known then. That was a huge red flag that nobody knew. The defense secretary is gone.
I've served under Democrat and Republican administrations. I've never seen the chaos that we have right now. And again, it is because of the president's diminished mental capacity and his people inside the White House covering up for it.
Wow. Congressman, thank you so much. Congressman Austin Scott, we so appreciate your time this morning. My apologies for the top of the interview. Thank you, sir. We'll be right back.